All right, we're having some microphone difficulty up here, so I hope everyone can hear me. We're having our annual update on the blueprint. I want to remind everyone that I know the governor's blueprint bill did drop today, but this is not a hearing on the governor's bill. This is an update on progress of blueprint. We will have a full hearing on the governor's bill, and it will be a joint hearing, much like today, with Ways and Means and Appropriations. Before we get to our guests, I want to just chair Ways and Means.
Yeah. Thank you. First, I'm very excited to be in this beautiful room. Thank you. I would like to welcome Madam Speaker, Chair Barnes. Thank you for having this joint hearing with us. I want to thank all of our education leaders across the state for joining us this morning to discuss this very important topic. The Blueprint for Maryland's Future represents an unprecedented investment in our children, their education, and the future of the economy of the state. The Blueprint's vision of providing a world-class education and opportunities for every child, no matter their income or where in the state they live, is one that Chair Barnes and I are both committed to and believe in very deeply. We look forward to working with all of you to ensure that we can make the vision a reality. I'll turn it back over to Chair Barnes.
Okay, and just lastly, just want to welcome our Speaker of the House with us today. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for being with us. Let's get started, but I do think that's just indicative of how important the blueprint is to the House of Delegates. So without further ado, Dr. Josh Michael and Dr. Tanette Smith, I think, is our first panel from the State Department of Education. Welcome. We're not going to time witnesses, but I do want to say that we do have, there is a hearing coming in here at 1 o'clock, so we have about a 12:40 hard stop.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, Chair Barnes, Chair Atterbury, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the implementation of the blueprint on behalf of the State Board and the Maryland State Department of Education. I'm Dr. Josh Michael, President of the Maryland State Board of Education. With me today, representing Superintendent Wright, is Dr. Tanette Smith, Interim Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning at the Maryland State Department of Education. The Blueprint for Maryland's Future represents the most comprehensive public school reform effort in the United States. As a product of Maryland Public Schools, a former middle school math teacher in Baltimore City, and now a Baltimore City school parent, this work of developing a top public education system for students from all backgrounds is personal. The goal of the blueprint is to develop a world-class public education system in Maryland, ranked among the top states in the country. Fundamentally, the blueprint reshapes structures of opportunity for young people in Maryland, particularly for our at-promise students, through equity by design. We are pleased to report meaningful progress across all 5 pillars of this major education reform law. MSDE and the Accountability and Implementation Board, the AIB, have been working in lockstep over the past 18 months to better support implementation of the blueprint. Our organizations meet weekly at the staff level, monthly at the leadership level, and quarterly in public at the board level to further align our efforts. We host a joint public meeting next Tuesday at 9 a.m. MSDE and the AIB also work collaboratively with Maryland's 24 LEAs to improve implementation and solve challenges as they arise. All of our actions center on doing what is right for students. We are entering the 4th school year of the blueprint's implementation since the law was enacted in 2021. We are clear-eyed in our shared and deep commitment to the blueprint, the promise that it carries for public education, and the core goals and strategies outlined in the plan. We believe the blueprint pointed us in the right direction 4 years ago, and that in order to stay on that trajectory, we must continue to adapt the blueprint to meet the realities of public education in 2025. We are pleased to highlight key achievements across each of the blueprint's 5 pillars. In Pillar 1, early childhood education, We have expanded access to full-day public pre-kindergarten in all corners of the state. With the help of Chair Atterbury through House Bill 1441 last year, we've been able to accelerate the expansion of pre-K providers. This school year, we have 24,270 students enrolled in publicly funded full-day pre-K. That's an increase of nearly 9,000 students since the adoption of the blueprint. Overall, we have 33,997 students enrolled in pre-K, including half-day and full-day programs. About 28,000 of them 4-year-olds, about 6,000 3-year-olds. This fall, we added 1,626 publicly funded full-day pre-K seats. That's on top of the 1,109 new public seats that were added in the fall of 2023. 751 of this year's new seats, or 46%, were in private childcare settings. We've had a 56% increase in the number of pre-K expansion applications here in the current year. Partnering with both local school systems and private providers, we are poised to accelerate pre-K enrollment moving into school year 2025-26. Our goals are to maximize the Our goals are to maximize the number of Tier 1 4-year-olds served and to expand pre-K participation for Tier 1 3-year-olds and Tier 2 and Tier 3 4-year-olds through our mixed delivery system. Our Push to Pre-K initiative at MSDE continues to bring new private providers on board: family childcare providers, childcare centers, Head Start programs, faith-based programs, and particularly Spanish-speaking providers to help truly build our mixed delivery public pre-K system. Additionally, through House Bill 1441, we are midstream on critical efforts to expand the childcare workforce. This bill expanded the eligibility for pre-K teacher assistants to those with 5 or more years of pre-K experience on the ground. MSD is working with MHEC and stakeholders through the Early Childhood Work Group to establish an early childhood career ladder for eligible private providers, ensuring alignment with the Child Care Credential Program so that more child care staff will be eligible for Blueprint-funded pre-K and the Child Care Credential Program bonuses. This effort is critical for strengthening professional learning and career advancement opportunities for early childhood educators, ultimately leading to enhanced outcomes for children and families. We are pleased to continue expanding wraparound supports as well for young children and families through key strategies of the Blueprint. Since 2022, we have opened 37 new Judy Center Learning Hubs, which brings the total number of current Judy Centers statewide to 93. In FY24, Judy Center served 15,000 families and over 17,000 children from birth to age 5. We expect to serve over 18,000 this year. Last fiscal year, Patty Centers provided family supports and services to nearly 600 families birth to 3, including 600 adults and 700 children. Now to Pillar 2, which focuses on elevating the profession for educators. We continue to make critical strides in teacher development and compensation. All 24 LEAs have confirmed at least a 10% salary increase for teachers between 2019 and 2024. In fiscal year 2025, MSDE awarded $783,000 to nearly all LEAs to support teachers in pursuing national board certification. We are pleased to share that last month, 1,089 teachers earned their national board certification, totaling 2,279 statewide with that designation. Finally, all LEAs have successfully launched levels 1 through 3 of the Educator Career Ladder, expanding pathways for educators to lead in schools while remaining in the classroom. While we are proud of the progress to date, we recognize that there's more work to be done. Only 264 nationally board certified teachers are teaching in low-performing schools, representing 12% of Maryland's MBC teachers, despite the incentives in place. Additionally, 19% of our national board certified teachers identify as educators of color. We also know that our teachers in high poverty schools are twice as likely to be inexperienced, out of field, and provisionally licensed than low poverty schools. Further, the educator shortage continues to be a reality that public schools must navigate. We are pleased to report that the teacher vacancy rate is down, but it still persists at about 1,600 teachers statewide. Notably, the proliferation of conditionally licensed teachers in Maryland has emerged as a new reality since the adoption of the blueprint. To be clear, these are leaders in your communities at home who have stepped up to answer the call to serve in classrooms that don't have a teacher. These educators are 60% Black and brown, more often from your communities and the communities of the students they serve. Today, we have over 6,000 conditionally certified teachers in Maryland, triple the number when you first passed the blueprint, and 7 times the number when the Kirwan Commission began its work nearly a decade ago. 1 in 3 new teachers hired in Maryland is not a licensed teacher before entering the classroom. Combined together, that means 1 in 10 classrooms in Maryland is either staffed by a substitute teacher or an unlicensed teacher. To be clear, we look at the glass half full. Our conditionally licensed educators who have answered the call to serve, who are diverse Black and brown educators from our community, are assets to our schools. This is the core vision of Pillar 2 of the blueprint. We just need to update our strategies. In April 2024, we revised regulations for teacher licensure to align to the blueprint, laying the groundwork for streamlined pathways to teaching. The in-district licensure pathway allows LEAs to develop streamlined, on-the-job teacher preparation training for conditionally licensed teachers. Enrollment in Maryland educator preparation programs has increased since 2016-2017, reversing a trend, you'll see. But our programs are not yet producing more graduates. And to date, we fill no more than 1 in 5 of our teacher vacancies each year with graduates from our traditional educator prep programs here in Maryland. The teacher shortage makes the implementation of collaborative time, as first envisioned by the blueprint, impossible to implement without sacrificing instructional time or growing class sizes for students. Before we can begin recruiting the new 15,000 teachers called for in the blueprint, we need to license our 6,000 conditionally certified, or conditionally licensed educators who have already answered the call to serve our children, and then fill the 1,600 vacancies that remain. As educators, we at MSDE fundamentally understand that more collaborative time in professional learning is critical to improving the working conditions for the educators we hope to retain and attract to teaching. That's why we support approaches like the pilot programs that allow schools to develop innovative models to implement collaborative time, while we invest in grow your own programs and expand state and local professional development for our teachers. If we are to deliver on the promise of the blueprint, we must deepen and strengthen our teacher pipeline. Grow your own teacher programs lead to professional teacher licensure while earning a wage with benefits and receiving on-the-job training. Grow your own programs recruit and prepare candidates from neighborhoods in your districts at home to teach in your local schools, increasing retention of currently under-licensed educators and truly strengthening connections between teachers, students, and families in your communities. I'm now pleased to turn it over to Dr. Tanette Smith to discuss progress on Pillars 3, 4, and 5.
Thank you. Under Pillar 3, College and Career Readiness, we continue to take steps to bolster the pre-K through 12 research-aligned instructional systems called for by the blueprint, starting with early literacy and numeracy. This fall, we adopted the Maryland Comprehensive Pre-K through Grade 3 Literacy Policy to ensure every student receives equitable, effective, and evidence-based reading instruction that prepares them for long-term academic success. This commitment is bolstered by a $40 million grant from the U.S. Department of Education, which will drive improvements in literacy instruction across our schools. Additionally, a generous $6.8 million philanthropic contribution from the IBIS Group is providing tuition-free access for teachers statewide to a micro-credential program focused on instructional practices aligned with the science of reading. And later this month, the board will take up a comprehensive math policy. To further enhance student outcomes, MSDE convened a broad-based assessment and accountability task force. This group was tasked with strengthening the connection between student growth, achievement, and school ratings. This task force developed a report, and we are now actively working to operationalize these recommendations, planning for new assessments and revisions to our school and district accountability systems to ensure they more accurately reflect and support student progress and success. Our school report card system must better reflect academic growth and outcomes in our schools. The Career and Technical Education Committee has established new policies related to apprenticeships and industry-recognized credentials. Though we have more work to do as a state, last year 8 times more students were participating in apprenticeships than just 3 years earlier. We now have 1,045 students participating in apprenticeships statewide. These efforts lay the groundwork to significantly increase the number of students taking advantage of CTE opportunities and prepare them for high-demand careers. While the demand for work-based learning remains high, we are working with businesses across the state of Maryland to expand these partnerships. Concurrently, MSD is redesigning all CTE pathways, reviewing and updating all course level standards, and developing best practices and real-world examples of how LEAs can modify their master schedules to ensure that all students have the opportunity to fully participate in advanced courses, dual enrollments, and in apprenticeships. And finally, our Office of College and Career Pathways recently launched the I Choose to Teach CTE campaign, which highlights the many talented CTE teachers who chose to leave industries and teach in Maryland classrooms. We're excited to promote these educators' stories and others throughout the month of February, which is designated as National CTE Month. Under Pillar 4, providing more resources to ensure all students are successful, we are prioritizing our at-promise students. Community schools provide wraparound services for students and families based on the specific needs of the community. These can include health services, adult education programs, and other vital community resources such as childcare and food assistance. Maryland has emerged as a national leader in supporting community schools. In the fall of 2023, we added 103 more community schools, and in the fall of 2024, we added an additional 167. We have now identified schools serving 55% or more students living in poverty and have expanded to 621 total community schools and 23 LEAs across Maryland. We are encouraged with the administration's plan. Plan addresses implementation challenges by providing robust training and support to schools and leveraging partnerships to combat child poverty. We're glad to see that the plan includes additional bandwidth for our MSDE Office of Community Schools, which currently has 2 positions who support 45% of all public schools in the state. And over the past 18 months, the Blueprint Special Education Work Group has convened 15 times to thoroughly evaluate the services, instruction, and funding allocation for students with disabilities. This diverse work group is comprised of public school administrators, educators, higher education faculty, legislators, advocates, parents, and special education experts. By December of 2024, the work group had formulated 23 pivotal recommendations and is currently developing a prioritized implementation plan. This plan will prioritize by delivery date key components that MSDE leads and support staff and a project tracker will use to ensure accountability. In addition to addressing the needs of students with disabilities, we are intensifying our efforts to support multilingual learners and their families. MSDE has partnered with Community Wells, Maryland Latinos United, and Casa de Maryland in a joint forum to foster collaboration and strengthen community engagement. And in December of 2024, the state successfully completed the ML Family Coordinators Training Series, equipping coordinators with strategies to foster family engagement, advocacy, and access to critical services. Concurrently, we're delivering focused professional development opportunities aimed at closing the achievement gaps in literacy and mathematics for multilingual learners. These efforts are designed to align with the state's accountability frameworks, ensuring that all MLs have the resources and supports they need to thrive academically and socially. Pillar 5 focuses on governance and accountability. Thanks. Our expert review team, comprising educators and subject matter experts, conducted comprehensive visits to 130 schools across 24 LEAs during the 23-24 school year. This includes 30 schools visited by the ERT and 80 schools reviewed and visited by the literacy review team. These teams evaluated blueprint implementation, and they work collaboratively with school leaders to identify and address gaps, strengthen local implementation plans, and enhance instructional practices. Building on this momentum, the expert review teams are expanding their reach in the current school year to more than 150 schools, with a heightened focus on improving literacy and mathematics instruction to drive student success. We've also launched the Blueprint Financial Reporting System. This platform allows us to track and ensure compliance with the Blueprint's funding requirement. And in fiscal year 2024, all LEAs were given access to the system to participate in a beta test. The system establishes fiscal year 2025 as our baseline. Fiscal year 25 data will become available in the Blueprint Financial Reporting System in the fall. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Michael, who will share closing thoughts on our collective commitment to the Blueprint's success and the path forward.
In closing, we stand deeply committed to realizing the promise and vision of the Blueprint, building a world-class public education system for all of Maryland's students, and doing what it takes to get it right. The stakes are high. The Blueprint is truly a once-in-a-generation opportunity and represents our nation's biggest bet on public education. We understand that achieving the goals of the Blueprint requires thoughtful, deliberate implementation focused on student outcomes. Our mission remains clear: deliver a world-class education for every child in Maryland. We look forward to partnering with you and stakeholders across the state to ensure every child in Maryland receives the world-class education they deserve. Thank you for your time. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Michael, and thank you for your team for the thorough presentation. I think it's really heartening to see the really significant progress that we have made in the Blueprint, and I think it's particularly significant given when you think that we are only 3 years in to a 10-year rollout. Only 3 years into an implementation, and we've already seen the kind of progress you've outlined in early childhood and getting more teacher certifications and the like. So I think that is probably why you've seen such reticence from the speaker and from Chair Atterbury and I to sort of pause or roll back any of the provisions now, particularly given the progress we're finally starting to see and make. So I do think we will open for questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I also want to thank you, Dr. Michaels, and thank the State Board, and thank you, Dr. Smith, for your presentation. It was very thorough. I just want to touch on a couple of quick things. I'm excited about the expansion of the private-public partnerships in pre-K. As you know, that was very near and dear to my heart, and we worked really hard on it last year in conjunction with appropriations. So I'm excited about that. I'm very happy to see that we are reaching our most vulnerable students in the community schools and the expansion of that. It shows that it's important, and we're helping our most our kids in need. And finally, I'm happy there's a focus on multilingual families and helping to close that achievement gap. You highlighted the importance of that. And so I will go to the Vice Chair of Ways and Means for the first question.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for this really detailed presentation. It was really helpful to hear pillar by pillar the amazing progress that we're making and the impact that we're making when it comes to the blueprint for Maryland's future. I wanted to talk and unpack a little bit more around the community schools, and it was stated that we are a national leader when it comes to community schools. Could you talk more about the specific impacts that community schools have had in our communities and the families served, especially since our community schools do provide services to our highest concentration of poverty schools? So if you can unpack some more of the progress that we're making.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wilkins, for the question. Just to frame it out, again, we have about 44% of our state is now a community school. I think it's important to note, though, that our schools that have the highest rates of concentrated poverty, those with over 80% students living in poverty, were the schools that were phased in first. And so those are the schools that have been at this work now for 4 years. I would have a significant allocation with the Concentrations of Poverty grant. All of that means these are schools that are now able to add upwards of $3,000 additional per student at that school to provide wraparound supports. It looks like, mobile dentists coming into school, making sure children have glasses. Those wraparound supports that they're getting, the students and families have access to medical care in schools. It also means in many of our schools that that they're receiving additional access to interventions, academic interventions, support, literacy support teachers, access to the arts, both in the school day and outside beyond what they would have received on the other program lines. In fact, the State Board was pleased to receive a presentation from Baltimore City Public Schools in December, where we really got a full, robust presentation on the work that's been done in really building out the community schools program. Last, just to add a couple points that I think are worth noting, we saw in our school report card ratings this year that nearly all of our schools that were rated level 1 last year moved up to level 2 on the star ratings. Nearly all of those schools, 23, were community schools. And we see in our data that our community schools are moving faster in terms of reading and mathematics achievement. We still have room to grow. I want to be really clear. We have a lot of room to grow in terms of achievement. But in terms of growth, our community schools are moving faster than our others. Anything to add, Dr. Smith?
Just like to add that within the confines of those community schools, you see children having more access to tutors in math and reading, which also can tend to increase our student outcomes. So those access to those interventions support those kiddos who are most at risk.
And goes to a community school in Baltimore City, and that meant I got like 4 notifications that we were 2 hours delayed. So communication really increases from our community school coordinator on Class Dojo. So, on a personal note, the connections between home and school are really growing as we have people dedicated to this work.
So we have a lot of lights on, which is great. It means there's a lot of interest in the blueprint and its successes. But we are going to just ask members to limit it to 1 question per member at this point because we have a big agenda and we do have a hard stop. With that, Delegate Acevedo.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for the briefing. It'll be a little bit difficult to condense my question here because I really had some questions regarding, support for teachers in classroom. I hear from a good bit of teachers in my district around teacher preparation time and how that impacts instruction, how it impacts learning. And I'd be very much interested to hear, a little bit more specifically what you all are doing to support teachers so that they are in turn providing the kind of, whether it's culturally competent instruction that students are expected to get. But then also around you had mentioned in your presentation the number of teachers of color in the classroom. And I'm just curious, in a state that not only has 4 HBCUs and 2 Hispanic serving institutions, what are we doing to foster that relationship with HSIs and HBCUs to close that gap that you're talking about with Black, Latinx, Asian American, and Pacific Islander teachers in the classroom? We have that resource. What kind of intentionality is being put behind working with these institutions so that you're filling that gap? So if you all could respond to that, I'd appreciate it.
So I'll answer it in 2 parts. I'll hit the policy side and then pass over to Dr. Smith. Let me state clearly the big challenge, and I address this in the presentation. In terms of pre-service preparation, 1 in 5 of the new teachers we hire come from our institutions of higher education from a traditional educator prep program. So the reality is that this work really must be on-the-job training and support. Dr. Smith in a second will outline many of the pieces that we are leading at MSDE and doing in partnership with schools. But I just want to state clearly, so much of the work that we must do to reach all children and support all teachers is that on-the-job training at this point in time. To your question, we are partnering and looking at ways to really deepen the partnership pipelines to bring more teachers into the profession. We know that partnership with HBCUs and our Hispanic serving, Latinx serving institutions are critical opportunities for us. We are really we're partnering right now. We've started conversations with MHEC to see how we can dig deeper with our HBCUs and other institutions, really around the opportunity of certifying our 6,000 teachers that are underprepared in the classroom, those conditionally licensed teachers. I'll turn it to Dr. Smith to talk about the professional learning work.
Thank you. The one thing that we note is that teachers don't leave the profession because of the lack of money. They leave for the lack of support or the lack of the opportunity for professional learning. And so we have partnered with the IBIS group to offer free of charge to teachers across the state of Maryland access to SUNY micro-credentialing work around the science of reading. We've had to date around 4,000 teachers enroll, and that's from September to today. And teachers are constantly looking for additional supports, so we are expanding our offering. We started out with Pathways to Literacy Leaderships and Pathways to Proficient Reading in Secondary. We've expanded our offering now to include language comprehension among English learners, and we've had about 214 teachers to apply to receive this coursework since October when we released it. And we also, in October, the end of October, as a matter of fact, opened a course around demystifying dyslexia. And since its inception, 1st of November, we've had 537 teachers to enroll in that coursework. I couldn't tell you the racial makeup of those teachers, but I can tell you that many of these teachers are focusing on those most at-risk students.
Okay, Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. One of the narratives that's emerging is that our budget problems are because of the blueprint. This is a false narrative. Our friends on appropriations let us know for sure that that's true. But there are still things that are being examined to be cut, and one of them is collaborative time. The blueprint calls for a reduction in the amount of in-class time, but an increase in the amount of time that teachers spend collaborating and working together. That is something that's being discussed as being held back or delayed, and I'm curious what value you attach to that time as far as teachers goes. If you just like to elaborate on what I consider to be the importance of it, and when you're our partners, I think you probably share it, but I'd love to hear you elaborate a little.
Look, we are deeply committed to providing more opportunities for educators to collaborate with one another. There is a simple math problem at this point in time in terms of the number of teachers we have and the students that need to be served. And the educator shortage that has changed in some way makes the math of how do we get that done in the way the blueprint prescribed it in the first place really challenging. And it gives us, we believe at this point, two choices in terms of the way this was structured to start with. That is, either if we can't bring on new teachers, that we either need to raise class size or we need to lower the amount of time that students are in front of a teacher and instead put them in front, have them led by a paraeducator or somebody else. So we think that the goal of more collaborative time within a teacher's day is a really valuable one, and one that we are deeply committed to partnering with you all and others to figuring out. We think there are other ways to build in more collaborative time. We have schools across the state that with federal funds a decade ago looked at ways to build in more collaborative time with alternative schedules 1 day a week, having additional teacher time after school, looking at scheduling in particular ways that maybe don't require additional teachers to pull off more collaborative time or less teaching. We see this as a critical opportunity. We cannot wait until we have 15,000 teachers to figure this problem out. So we are deeply committed to figuring this out in new and innovative ways because of how important we believe additional collaborative time is to teachers in the profession.
They should turn it on for you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say thank you to the presenters, Dr. Michael, Dr. Smith. Dr. Michael is my constituent. Just got to give a shout out to the 45th District there. Like you, I also send my children to a community school. I wanted to just see if you had any more context or data behind. Clearly, there's less nationally board certified teachers that are teaching in the high poverty schools, and that was, its own slide. But on the following slide, it mentions that high poverty schools also have just under a quarter of their teaching core being inexperienced teachers. Based on your experience, you're far more experienced and credentialed in education than I, do you believe that high poverty schools need to have more focus around the experience, or is the national board certification more important than having more experienced teachers in the schools?
I think both are important, and I think a strong staff has a fabric of people with experience that have deep connection in the community, that know 3 generations of students that have gone through the school, and also people that have been recognized for having really being at the top of their profession in terms of going through the national board certification process. I think both are really important, and both are lacking in our high poverty schools and in our community schools. So I would say that we should really focus on both as we move forward.
Delegate Patterson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. My question has to do with the early childhood program and services. You cited the Judy Center and the Patty Center, but in my community, we also have the Head Start programs. So is that part of partnerships, or are you considering partnerships with Head Start centers as well?
Absolutely. Fundamentally, we see Head Start programs as a critical part of the portfolio of providers in that 0 to 5 continuum, our early learning continuum. The specific way that we hope to partner more deeply with Head Start programs is by integrating Head Start providers into our portfolio of private providers of public pre-kindergarten for 3 and 4-year-olds. The way that we have the tier 1s and 2s structured allows for more students to be served than the income eligibility for Head Start. And so we see, quite frankly, our Head Start providers as some of our most important assets. And these are people that have been leading the delivery of childcare and early education for decades in our community and have generations of partnerships with families. So as we bring on and expand that system, we see Head Start as a critical partner, and that there's a big opportunity to align expectations of the federal Head Start program with pre-K and to really build on top of and provide stability for our Head Start providers as we support the ecosystem at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. The last big investment that we had in education was Thornton, and the reluctance that many of us had, with the blueprint in the beginning, was that with Thornton, outcomes never really improved much from the beginning to the end. At least the measurable outcomes haven't really improved much. And so with the blueprint, obviously this is a big issue for some and many of us. So Dr. Smith, you had mentioned the assessments. Can you expand on what you were referring to? I'm guessing you're referring to standardized testing. Can you expand on or elaborate on that? And also, are these assessments going to make it easier for students, or will it make a difference at all?
Dr. Smith, but I do want to contest the notion that we didn't see test scores improve during Thornton. In fact, in the history of the nation's report card in Maryland, we saw the most growth from the year 2000 to 2009 when the Thornton funding was fully funded. It changed during the financial crisis and the response there. But it is precisely during that time that we saw more improvement in our state ranking on the nation's report card than any other time in the past 50 years. And it is precisely the time that we saw closing of achievement gaps for students who live in poverty, for our Black and brown students. So I would contest that notion to start with. It is actually the time where we have seen the most growth in our state, particularly compared to peers across the country. Dr. Smith, on the technical aspects?
And as far as our technical advisory committee, we are looking at aligning and realigning our assessments so that we are providing more robust assessments that will really get our students to a place that they are college and career ready. We want to ensure that we are assessing the right stuff at the right time, right? We are revising our accountability system, looking at how we rank schools and rate schools, and ensuring that we're taking into consideration growth on top of the student outcomes. So one thing that we've noticed is that we don't take into consideration where kiddo starts and where they end up. And so we want to ensure that we use growth as a measure as well.
Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think partially answered one question when Delegate Wilkin asked a question, is that because I didn't see the result on your slides about actually most Star 1 school moved to Star 2. I think that's a huge improvement. I hope in the future you can show that on your slide as well. And a similar question about, for the performance side, one side we look at the school level, the other side maybe we can look at the individual student level. Like in the future, right, if you do analysis, can you analyze how much students have been improving? That may help you decide what you can do or how do you change your strategy. Just some recommendation. Thank you.
All right, Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. And I just want to echo the comments of Chair Atterbury and thank her for her leadership and partnership on the pre-K work that we did last year. And so my question, one of the parts of HB 1441 that was really important to me was the creation of these hubs. And we all know it's really important, the private provider mix, because if we pull all the 4-year-olds out into public schools, our childcare system, which has been such an incredible success over the last couple of years, starts to fall apart. So the hubs are really important to make sure that we're providing the wraparound supports for private providers to get into the blueprint, to do the shared services, to do all sort of the back end stuff that they don't necessarily have the expertise to do on their own. And just curious if you could share, where are we in setting up the hubs? What does the plan look like for standing them up around the state?
Like you, we believe that the infrastructure support, particularly for our private providers, is critical. At this time, that part has not been funded in terms of building out the hubs. So we are exploring ways potentially to get support from our federal partners. We're looking to see if we can get support from philanthropy to build this. And the last thing I would say, in the absence of funding for the hubs at this point in time, we at MSDE are doubling down and making a commitment to providing more of that support from the state for our private providers. You know that the funding itself comes through MSDE to go to our private providers, and there's been some question, who is supporting our local, our private providers, and we are leaning in as we move into this next round of being more and more that resource while we build the infrastructure on the ground. So we have a deep commitment at MSDE to making sure that happens.
Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you to both the chairs and the presentation. In reference to slide 23 with the community schools, I just have some confusion. Reporting requirements are due by each jurisdiction. So are there schools that are identified or qualified to be a community school, however, that school jurisdiction hasn't chosen to opt in because of cost or, in other words, are every school that qualifies to be a community school currently community school now?
Yes.
And then the benchmarks that you were showing us, are they all improving, some improving more rapidly than others?
There's, of course, variation. And that's part of what we're very focused on. Dr. Smith talked about the need for infrastructure. She has 2 staff on this that support 621 schools. We know, and we were so pleased to receive a report from Baltimore City again in December. They really have the model this. They've been working at this. They incubated community schools, have been working on it for 15 years, and we're seeing that work. And we seek to build that level of support across the state in coming years.
Thank you.
Right. Delegate McCaskill.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. Thank you, chairs, for allowing me this opportunity. So for some of you, you may know that I am a community partner. I have been for the past 26 years and have been proud of it. And so, which is what brought me over to the chair that I sit in of one of the many hats that I do wear. And so I'm concerned about the health of the child care community, and especially looking at the highlighted portion of what our Comptroller Brooke Lehrman released for the child care and the state of the economy. I'm looking at specifically, for the respect of time, I will be having my office reach out to you all for my other questions, but I have a concern. Kind of did my eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'm reading from the Public School Superintendent Association slide, and there is a suggestion of a removal of required participation percentage for the mixed delivery system and to permanently shift the responsibility of supporting and cultivating private providers to MSDE. And there's a concern that there is not enough, I'm thinking, workforce to make sure that this is carried out. I'm curious of what your take on this matter of, one, reducing the percentage, and the concern that there is not enough support to mandate the public schools to help providers become part of this mixed delivery.
Thank you for your question. First, let me state that in this mixed delivery system, we see public and private providers as essential to building this ecosystem that we seek. We believe that shifting the focus to the number of students served statewide will, and while we're tracking the percentage of private providers that we have, will really move the incentives to the place we need. Our number one focus must be children. And when we put our focus on children, we know that our public and providers are going to show up to the table when they have the appropriate supports in place. We believe that with the goals set out in law and the flexibility that you've given the Accountability and Implementation Board, that we can appropriately steer this moving forward. With that said, We do believe that it will benefit the system, and we will discuss this next week at our joint meeting with AIB, that further clarity on who should focus where will benefit everyone. The last thing I'd note is, again, like I said, the MSDE is going to lean in on that support with public providers. There's been a lot of confusion about whether that's our responsibility or local school systems. You all have set up that the money flows through MSDE, and for clarity's sake, we are taking on that responsibility of building out the private portion of this, and we're going to take that on. Of course, we need to partner with local communities and with public school systems, but we're taking on that responsibility because we just can't wait to bring on more providers and continue that trajectory that we talked about earlier of bringing on more private providers in our system.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Chair. Thank you both for this presentation, and most importantly, thank you for your dedication to our kiddos, because at the end of the day, they are all our kiddos. I wanted to focus my question on truancy reduction. We saw truancy really balloon during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's an issue that we face in the city. There have been strides to reduce truancy. Of course, our students can only get the quality education that they need when they're in the classroom. So I wanted to ask you for some specifics on, what we're doing to reduce truancy through the 5 pillars, and what we can be doing more and how we can help with that.
Truancy as a part of chronic absenteeism is a specific focus for MSDE. We are developing resources and partnering with the Attendance Works to provide additional resources to schools, LEAs, to identify strategies to keep those children in classrooms, to keep those kiddos where they need to be in a seat in a classroom. So we see this as an important component. It's pivotal that we address this in a very timely manner, and this is like one of the bigger focuses that we are focusing on for this school year.
Additional notes. One, you asked about the blueprint. First, pre-kindergarten in Pillar 1 establishes the school-going behavior in families that's critical to ensuring that persists. That's one. Two, community schools ensure that our students, our at-promise students, and our students who live in high-poverty communities have that wraparound support. And not just that we have the supports available, but that we have a quarterback in that community school coordinator that's really checking to see what support's needed. We learned in Baltimore City in December that over half of the community school coordinators lead the attendance team. So that person wouldn't be in the building if they weren't a community school coordinator. So there are a lot of supports. I do want to also highlight that we are pleased to be working with Vice Chair Wilkins and Delegate Smith on a bill on chronic absenteeism. So we'll look forward to discussing that with Ways and Means moving forward.
And we only have time for one more question, and that will be Delegate Miller.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for the update, and thank you, chairs. So one of the things I don't think we've touched on really is teacher retention. So we talked about getting teachers into the pipeline, but we haven't talked about teacher retention and the fact that 1 in 7 new teachers are more likely to leave. They're more likely to, teachers are often requesting changes of schools, changes of classrooms, changes, moving to other LEAs. What are we doing to support teachers at that critical time to keep them in our schools? Because we know it's not just about pay. We know that it's also about the climate and the culture and the conditions, especially in the classroom.
We know that our attrition rates, we have lowest retention in our schools that have the most at-promise students and the most concentration of students with poverty. And fundamentally, the blueprint reshapes opportunity structures for public education in those schools. So the blueprint takes that head on. We got to make sure that the money follows children in the schools where they need it most, so that those schools are adequately resourced, so that they have the wraparound supports and they have appropriate class sizes and experienced teachers that can help really put the school culture in those schools on the right path. So I'd say that's the first thing. And I'd say the second pieces that we've been looking at, of course, are the career ladder. Talked about that earlier. increased pay, which is important, but really that culture Dr. Smith talked about earlier are pieces that we're layering in. And we are exploring at MSDE, as we talked about, lots of new professional development. We know that educators get into it. I was an educator. We want to do a really good job in communities. We're hearing a lot from educators that they want more support and training on how to be great teachers of literacy. How to, if their students are struggling, what are the strategies they need? So we're leaning in to provide more of that support. Last thing I'd say, look, our teachers are professionals, just like all of us. They need time to go to the bathroom. They need time to talk to one another and plan. Can't just be in front of, we've got to be able to talk with one another and develop strategies of how to really support students and families. So while we don't have the new teachers we need for collaborative time, we are deeply committed to making sure we find ways to build that collaborative time into the Teacher's Day as we move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you both for being here. We are going to move on to our next portion with the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. We have Mrs. Bailey, Ms. Mallow, and Brian Dooley. And I'll just let the members know, you probably recall that we normally do have the AIB next, but they will be at the bottom of the agenda due to scheduling conferences, due to scheduling conflicts. I'm thinking of parent-teacher conferences, sorry. Welcome, and whenever you are situated and ready, you can begin.
Okay, it's still good morning. So, good morning, Madam Speaker, Chair Barnes, and Chair Atterbury, Vice Chairs Chang and Wilkins, and distinguished members of the House Appropriations and Ways and Means Committee. My name is Karen Bailey, and I'm the president of the Maryland Association of the Boards of Education Board of Directors, and also the chairperson of the St. Mary's County Board of Education. This is my 10th year serving on our Board of Education, and I have 2 children. I have a daughter who is a graduate of St. Mary's County Public Schools, and a son who is currently a junior at one of our local high schools. I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Jennifer Swickard-Mallow. She's a former chairperson and current member of the Howard County Board of Education, as well as MABE's Legislative Committee Chair, who will also be offering comments to you today. Thank you for your opportunity to share this collective testimony today regarding the implementation of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. MABE, on behalf of all of our local boards, supports the spirit and intent of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future and its vision for a world-class education system for each and every student in Maryland. However, while several components of the Blueprint have been successful, there have also been several areas that continue to present challenges to our local boards of education. We come to you today in continued partnership to achieve the goals set by the Blueprint. We do recognize the fiscal challenges facing the state and implementation challenges of the Blueprint. These challenges highlight the importance of a collaborative review of the Blueprint's mandate to identify practical solutions that can bridge the gap between the plan's visionary goals and the realities that face our communities. In this effort, it is vital that we work alongside the boards of education and preserve our roles and responsibilities to local communities. As each of you know, as elected representatives of your district, there is no one more qualified and uniquely positioned to understand the needs and within your respective communities.
As Mrs. Bailey's opening remarks suggested, we are proud of instances where the Blueprint's additional funding and supports have aligned with local needs and efforts leading to successes. For example, on the 2024 MSDE report card, an elementary community school in a local jurisdiction, which had a FARMS or free and reduced meals percentage population of 99.8%, and a 76% multi-language learner population, achieved a 4-star rating in 2024, moving up from a 3-star rating in 2023. The main driver of this increase came in the Progress in Achieving English Language Proficiency category on the Maryland report card, proving that additional Blueprint-directed student supports can make a difference. Yet it's more often the case statewide that Blueprint mandates have budgetarily exceeded the local's board abilities to meet requirements, or that the projections designed years ago have failed to account for inflationary impacts and new implementation requirements. In October, MABE conducted a statewide survey of school board members, superintendents, chief financial officers, and local blueprint implementation coordinators. Results from that survey cite many specific blueprint hurdles, including 1, a requirement of 75% of the funds that follow the child seems arbitrary years into implementation and creates an administrative and labor-intensive nightmare in reporting. Difficulties in delivering and expanding 4-year-old pre-K programs while faced with insufficient local provider coverage or building capacity to offer 3-year-old programs. Inadequate state funding to meet national board certification requirements, as multiple school board leaders across the state have asked, quote, if the state is requiring components of the blueprint, why isn't the state paying for them, end quote. Special education challenges that remain significant and under-addressed as districts encounter line item fiscal coverages as high as 300% per year. And a final example, most closely tied to students in today's discussions, that limited local funding used to fill blueprint gap forces districts to restrict or eliminate essential programs involving the arts, band, chorus, sports, and other extracurricular activities central to school engagement and the student experience. For these reasons, MABE supports broad discretion for the local board decision-making authority as outlined in our 2025 legislative priorities.
So, challenges that almost every school board system has faced, we have still made the tough decisions and opened doors and opportunities, especially in the apprenticeship programs for students across the state of Maryland. The Blueprint framework has also provided the same direction to help ensure more consistent delivery of education and learning across our state. We firmly believe that the success of the Blueprint depends on local school systems' ability to flexibly address challenges resulting from fiscal gaps while not reducing our local board governance or creating unfunded mandates. The Blueprint has built out universal goals, but we caution against the one-size-fits-all approach to implementation. We recognize that just as students have different needs based on how they are situated in their daily lives, their communities too have different needs. We have all heard the same comment: what works for one does not necessarily work for everyone. This is especially true when we discuss our students. Local boards of education, in partnership with elected officials, teachers, parents, and county governments, are best positioned to build systems with state support to meet those needs. Thank you all very much for your leadership in Maryland and for your opportunity and excellence in our schools throughout the state. And we are happy to take any questions.
Okay. I don't see any. Madam Chair? So, thank you so much for what you do and being with us today. Are we ready for AIB?
Yes. Next, we'll move to the AIB, and I think both presenters are going to be joining us virtually. We have Dr. Kerwin and Ms. Rachel Heiss.
Good to see you both.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I think it's still, sorry, it's afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us here today.
Yes, and let me also express my appreciation. I apologize for not being there in person, but I happen to chair the hospital board for the University of Maryland Medicine, and we had a board meeting this morning, so I just couldn't get from there to Annapolis in time for this meeting. But we're mindful that you've heard a lot this morning already, and we will tailor our presentation and try not to be repetitive. Let me start, if I may, with Rachel. You're going to manage the slides.
Actually, someone there is managing them.
So I just wanted to remind everyone of what the theory of action for the Blueprint is, as the General Assembly passed this legislation. I think the thing that we all are keeping our focus on is the box on the far right, the Blueprint outcome. It is our goal over the implementation period of the blueprint to reach a point where all Maryland students leave high school globally competitive and prepared for success in post-secondary education. That is our overarching goal. Now, how are we going to get there? Well, we're going to get there because we have these 5 mutually dependent pillars. We're going to start with early childhood education, preschool, and early child development. We're going to have high quality and diverse teachers. We're going to have a rigorous instructional system leading to the college and career ready standard for most students by the end of the 10th grade, so they can then have these pathways to choose from: early college, advanced placement curriculum, or a career and technical education pathway. And then finally, we're going to ensure that we invest resources so that all children have the resources they need in order to be successful. And overseeing all of this is the AIB, which is Pillar 5 of the blueprint. So if we go to the next slide, please. The blueprint's role is really, the AIB's role is really twofold. It is up to the AIB to oversee the implementation of the initiatives that the General Assembly built into the blueprint. And we do this by requiring all of the major players. You see them there, starting with the State Board of Education and the LEAs, the Career and Technical Education Council, et cetera, et cetera. They all have to develop their action plans for the implementation of the blueprint. And AIB reviews these plans and provides feedback, but ultimately must approve these plans. And we are well into this process of approving the action plans for the various entities responsible for the implementation. Our second obligation, our second role, is to hold all of these entities accountable for the success we all want to see with the blueprint. So that is our twofold mission. Next slide, please. Where are we at this point with the blueprint implementation? Well, we are completing the 3rd full year of blueprint implementation. Now, we have to all recognize that we got off to a slow start for reasons outside of the players involved in the implementation's possibility to change. We had a delay in the initial year of funding for the blueprint. Blueprint was passed right in the midst of COVID, and COVID has had a dramatic impact on sadly on our schools, and in particular on our teaching workforce. So many teachers have left the profession. And then, of course, we had a change in administration in the State Board of Education. And let me say how thrilled we are with the current superintendent. Dr. Carrie Wright has been a blessing to our state, and we at AIB are working in such close partnership with MSDE under her excellent leadership. But I think the point I want to make today is, despite these challenges at the beginning, we are really hitting our stride at this point with the implementation. We are approved plans are in place, which include many of the important initiatives to make the blueprint successful. What we're doing in Maryland is gaining national attention. I, for one, was asked to testify before Congress in the fall about the blueprint. It was seen by the members of Congress as such a remarkable strategy that the state of Maryland has developed, and we got very high marks from members of Congress of what we're doing in Maryland. So I think my message is here that we are as I say, hitting our stride. Things are beginning to happen. We're seeing successes with the blueprint. Now, we still have challenges to overcome. It would be impossible to have such a comprehensive change take place without challenges. This is not easy stuff. It's difficult stuff. But if we hold to it, if we stick to our guns and ensure that we faithfully implement the blueprint initiatives as developed by the General Assembly in the legislation creating this remarkable plan, we're going to get there. And we can already begin to see the elements that we should encourage everybody that this is going to be successful if we stick to our plans for full implementation. What we'd like to do now is talk a little bit about a few highlights. You've heard some already from the state board, a few highlights of success with the implementation, but then also talk about some of the challenges that we still face with the implementation and our strategies for addressing these challenges. So let me turn to Rachel Heiss to talk about the highlights and the challenges for each of the pillars.
Thank you, Dr. Curran, and thank you everyone for having us today. I don't want to duplicate what the state board and MSDE presented, such a comprehensive update on implementation and the real progress that is being made. So I will just focus on some of the things that were less focused on in MSDE's presentation. If you could go to the next slide. In Pillar 1, of course, we know that we still have work to do, but we are seeing tremendous growth in enrollment of full-day pre-K for 4-year-olds in particular. That's up 43% since school year 21-22. And then in addition, we also are seeing growth in private provider slots. A total of over 1,600 slots are now being offered by private providers in full-day pre-K. And very encouraging, the number of providers that are participating in the publicly funded program is also growing by 17% in the last year to 769 total. So these are what we think about as the input measures, or sort of the signs that further progress will come, because we are getting more of our 4-year-olds, particularly our tier 1 or low income 4-year-olds from low income families, into this full day pre-K, which we know with high quality programming is so critical to helping students get on the path for success. In Pillar 2, MSDE mentioned that all teachers received that 10% salary increase that was required by the blueprint law. We also have the AIB has approved or conditionally approved the career ladder for teachers for every LEA for the first 3 levels. So that's been a tremendous amount of work across the LEAs and the teachers bargaining units to come to those agreements. And then we really want to highlight the national board certification. So for the second year in a row, we just learned Maryland is leading the nation in the number of teachers that are first earning or maintaining their national board certification. In December, 1,289 teachers in Maryland received word that they had passed and earned that national board certification. It's very exciting for them and for the state. And in addition, Maryland, again, for the second year in the row, has the second highest number of teachers of color earning or maintaining national board. As was noted with MSDE, we still have work to do to increase the diversity of teachers that are pursuing national board and earning, but it is encouraging that Maryland does have the second highest number of teachers of color with NBC in the country. And really, as Dr. Kerwin noted, that Maryland is really leading the way across the nation in doing this work. And then another one of those sort of green shoots of data, we have 3,651 teachers who are currently pursuing national board certification. That is a huge increase since the first year of the 22 school year 21-22, over 400% increase in the number of teachers pursuing national board certification. So, that is hopefully a sign that the incentives that are built into the blueprint around earning national board certification and then moving up the career ladder are, teachers are taking advantage of that. They're interested in it, and hopefully that will lead to a really well flourishing career ladder in the future. Next slide. For pillar 3, we really wanted to emphasize the work that AIB has done with MSDE and with the Maryland Initiative for Literacy and Equity at the University of Maryland and Morgan State University to support pre-K through 12 literacy plans that every LEA submitted as part of their 2024 blueprint implementation plans that are all aligned with the science of reading. And this school year is the first year that literacy aligned with science of reading is being implemented across the state. This work is continuing in the mathematics field around science of instruction and math with the external partner of Johns Hopkins University and MSDE. And also MSDE is doing a significant amount of work in aligning math pathways, particularly in high school, to align to, recognizing that not every student and the career they're choosing needs the same math. But they all need a basic foundation of math in order to be college and career ready. We also have some information on dual enrollment. Over 23,500 students took dual enrollment courses, and that represents over 8% of Maryland high school students. We know that number is only going to grow as more and more students become college and career ready and pursue the post-CCR pathways. And then data on apprenticeships, which MSDE also mentioned, as a percentage increase, it's enormous, over 700% growth in apprenticeships that are in part because it is such a small number. And so we know we have a lot more work to do there, but we're starting to see the work pay off there. Next slide. Pillar 4 talked about community schools and the number of community schools that are now established across the state. One thing I wanted to highlight is, and there was some discussion of this with MSDE. So the data from the MCAP assessments show that from 2022 to 2024, the schools with the highest concentration of poverty, so those schools that are 80% and above, which have also been receiving the funds for the longest since fiscal 2020 was the first year that some concentration of poverty funds were provided through the legislation known as the Bridge to Blueprint. Those schools had English language art proficiency rates of 6.4 percentage point growth, which was much higher than all other schools. Now, it's still growing from a low baseline, so there's still work to do there, but the fact that those schools are showing the greatest growth is a sign that things are happening, outcomes are improving. We also wanted to highlight that every LEA now has a designated, at least one designated family coordinator for multilingual learners. This was a requirement of the blueprint. And then the special education work group has submitted, done tremendous amount of work and has submitted a preliminary final report with the final report coming this spring. Next slide. In terms of Pillar 5, as Dr. Kerwin noted, the AIB has been reviewing the implementation plan submitted by the LEAs, as well as the other state agencies that are required to implement the blueprint. In terms of the LEA plans, at this point, 20 of them have been fully approved, 3 are conditionally approved, and 1 is waiting approval. So we've made significant progress on that. We'll continue to be working with the state agencies on their plans. The LEAs are reporting that expenditure data through PowerSchool now, and we did receive preliminary data from MSDE that earlier this month that AIB staff are currently reviewing with preliminary data, and as was noted, the full year of data will not be available until after the fiscal 25 closeout in the fall. And then the expert review team visits that occurred last year and are continuing this year that are focused on elementary literacy and math instruction and really improving, helping our schools improve their instruction, their tier 1 instruction, their core instruction, as well as implementing tiered interventions. Okay. The next couple of slides really focus on some of the challenges that, the ongoing challenges that AIB working with MSDE and other state partners are really trying to be thought partners, both among ourselves and with our local partners to address some of these challenges. And we really tried to just identify one for each pillar, but there are more than one in many cases. But, you know, obviously implementing a mixed delivery model at full scale statewide for pre-K, it has been a challenge. The coming out of the pandemic with the fewer private providers, and then also the challenges of meeting the high quality requirements have really, and the business model have really been a challenge, as well as space, particularly in the public schools. And as was discussed, the House Bill 1441 that came out of with Delegate Chair Atterbury's leadership and your 2 committees really, I think, set the stage for success with the various flexibility and innovative pieces in there. AIB and MSD have been working on some joint policy to support effective implementation around particularly focusing on our tier 1 4-year-olds and making sure that as many of those that wish to be served have the opportunity to be in full day pre-K while continuing to build out the tier 2 and 3 as well as 3-year-olds. On pillar 2, the teacher shortage is a tremendous challenge, both for student learning right now, as well as for the implementation of collaborative time as envisioned by the blueprint over the next 8 years. And that collaborative time is so important, both to improve working conditions, but also to improve student outcomes. So the AIB really is committed to that original blueprint vision of additional collaborative time for teachers. And sometimes I think the term collaborative time is misunderstood. So just to be clear that this is time that the teachers are working outside the classroom to work with among themselves, looking at data and looking at observations to identify where students are falling behind or where they need actually to be more challenged, and then also to develop interventions and then work with students one-on-one and in small groups to provide those interventions. So
Rachel,
Yes.
Yeah, could I just say a word about this
Please.
collaborative time and how important it is? The commission I chaired that led to recommendation for the blueprint, as many of you will recall, we looked at the a half a dozen or so of the highest performing systems in the world to understand the elements of their success. And this was a critical piece of their success. This ability for professional development of the teachers, their ability to identify students with needs and have focused attention on those students, to develop new curricula and other interventions, work on pedagogical issues. They all indicated that this was critical to their success. The challenge we face, as Rachel has pointed out, is we are in a crisis at the moment of sorts with the teacher shortage. Not only do we not have enough certified teachers in our classrooms, there aren't enough coming out of our teacher preparation programs. And so the AIB met last week, and we recognize that the initiative on collaborative time, which was supposed to begin in the next fiscal year, the upcoming fiscal year, it just isn't going to be possible to hire the teachers necessary to implement the collaborative time. So the AIB board reached an agreement that there needed to be a pause. I want to emphasize pause in the implementation of collaborative time, important though it is, until we can build up the pipeline of teachers so that it can be implemented effectively. I just wanted Rachel to emphasize that point.
Thank you. And if we can go on to the next slide. Building out the rest of the career ladder for level 4, as well as for teachers, as well as school leaders, is going to be, a continuing challenge to fully implement the career ladder and the vision of the career ladder. But I think as we're seeing the national board certification numbers grow, that hopefully that is a sign that we're going to be able to get there. In Pillar 3, it's both making sure that we have a robust instructional system that is aligned to that college and career ready standard, and that sort of what we refer to as the North Star of making sure that all of our high school students have the opportunity to become college and career ready by grade 10 and no later than high school, and then building out those post-CCR pathways, particularly aligning workforce needs and career interests with our pathways. And really, we're going all in on apprenticeships in Maryland. This is another place where the blueprint is really leading the way nationally. And it is very challenging to bring employers on board to offer those apprenticeships. And so that is a real need that we've been working with the CTE committee as they've been developing plans to be able to build the capacity to offer more apprenticeships for students. And then you also talked about with MSDE, the community schools, and how important it is to implement that model effectively. We are seeing good progress in those schools around the ELA proficiency, as I discussed, but making sure, because it is such a significant investment that we're making in these schools, that that we're able to implement the model consistently and use the funds effectively. And then the special education work group, and then also the multilingual learner work group that reported last year, both have recommendations to improve outcomes for multilingual learners, that the LEAs are on multilingual learner beginning to implement, and that MSDE is working to support that implementation. And finally, the next slide on Pillar 5, the main challenge, there are others, but the main challenge here is the minimum school funding requirement, that the blueprint calls for money to follow students to their schools, that was intended to provide the supports and services that those students need based on their needs. And this is really, it's a two-part challenge. It's, a data challenge in terms of the LEAs being able to uh, code all of their expenditures, both to a revenue source, meaning one of the blueprint formulas, and then also to a location, which is the school, and then accurately reporting all of that data up to Power School. This is not something that LEAs have done previously, and so this is another area where the blueprint is really calling on LEAs in this case to do things differently, and that's a challenge, and it takes time. And then really the resource allocation challenge, the budget allocation of implementing the policy, to make sure that those dollars are making their way to the students that have those needs and that the needs are being met. And if we go to the next slide, that sort of is a good segue to some of the, we wanted to provide just some examples of the support for implementation that the AIB is providing. And the technical assistance grants that you all have provided to the AIB through the budget are a primary source of our support right now in terms of linking LEAs to experts that can support implementation of the blueprint. And in phase one, last year, we allocated $2.4 million to LEAs in the CTE committee for this work. And this year, we're have an estimated allocation of $3.6 million. We're still receiving requests for additional awards, which is why we don't have a final number for this year, and we're doing our best to meet all of the requests for assistance. We're very pleased that in phase two this year, all 24 of our LEAs and the CTE committee are receiving grants in at least one of the following areas, and that includes those strategic facilitators that you may have heard of that are working directly with the LEAs to support their blueprint implementation, and also supported in developing their plans they submitted last year. And then resource allocation and strategic budgeting. That was a high priority area that the AIB is providing this year to really support that work that LEAs are doing around meeting the minimum school funding requirement, and try to help them both with the data challenge in some cases, as well as the strategic budgeting challenge. And then we also have a small number of LEAs that are participating in pre-K expansion, career ladder, and college and career readiness assistance that's very focused on those topics. And the technical assistance includes working with an expert, meeting in communities of practice monthly to share challenges and innovative solutions, and then office hours supported by our experts to receive individualized support. Next slide. There's additional examples that we have here that include, of course, we meet regularly with all of our partners. The board meets regularly with the state board, both at the leadership level and then jointly. We also have our advisory committees, and we recently added a 5th advisory committee around Pillar 5. The other 4 have been meeting for a couple of years now. We're pleased that we have representation from across the state. They meet quarterly at least, and more often monthly, and really focus on blueprint implementation from implementers who are on the ground, and discussing both the successes and the challenges. But some of these meetings have been great ways where AIB, MSDE, as well as other LEAs are hearing about things that are working in different schools and districts that they might want to consider replicating. And a good example of this is an early childhood center that in Washington County, at I think it's the Boyd Technical High School, that has opened an early childhood center in that high school that is supporting both the full-day pre-K offering, plus giving their students the opportunity to, for career CTE program and perhaps an apprenticeship, develop their skills in early childhood education for those high school students. And lastly, the AIB, I think one of the value adds that the AIB has is the ability to bring together partners from different segments that have not traditionally collaborated together to try to discuss the challenges and come up with solutions. And we've done this in the areas of pre-kindergarten, teacher preparation, dual enrollment, career counseling, and we will continue to do that just to support that sharing of information and pushing towards better implementation. And then I think, Dr. Kerwin, turn
Sure.
it over to you.
Yeah, if we could go to the next slide, looking forward. One of the points I made at the outset is that AIB, of course, according to the blueprint, has the overall responsibility for the implementation and the accountability with the blueprint. But our partner, our main partner in this effort is, of course, MSDE and the State Board of Education, because they have the interface with the with all of the LEAs. And I just want to re-emphasize how well we are working together. We meet regularly. The leadership of the two, AIB and the State Board, meet on a regular basis. The staff of AIB meets with Carrie Wright and her staff on a regular basis. So there's a tremendous amount of collaboration and going on between AIB and the State Board and MSDE. Just some examples of the impact of that collaboration and understanding. We know that there were some issues related to the career ladder and agreements and conditions surrounding the career ladder. And based on the information that the State Board and MSDE got from the LEAs, AIB and the State Board are coming together, and we're going to issue some new guidance for the LEAs on their career ladder submissions. Rachel mentioned just a moment ago about the minimum school funding. Again, in our discussions together, we've decided that we needed to establish a waiver process for some of the smaller LEAs where the minimum school funding really becomes impractical. They can't take advantage of the economy of scale. And so we're going to issue a waiver policy. And that's because of the very effective communication down to the LEAs and between the State Board and AIB. Now that we have are moving along with the implementation of the blueprint, AIB is going to increase its focus on progress with the implementation.
Dr. Kerwin, we're up against
AIB and the State
Dr.
Board
Kerwin.
have agreed on aligned metrics so that.
Dr. Kerwin?
Yes, ma'am.
We hate to cut you off. We are really pressed for time.
Oh, okay.
We know you are an expert and you could just talk about this the rest of the afternoon. And we appreciate that. And Ms. Heiss, we
I
appreciate you
completely
both being here.
understand.
We have two quick questions that we'll
Sure.
take, and then we'll let the final presenters come forward. So Delegate
Okay,
Fair.
that's fine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for your excellent presentation. During the interim, many of the members of the Ways and Means Committee met with a number of LEAs around the state, and we heard some consistent concerns around reporting. I really appreciated that you mentioned the career ladder criteria for success, but other areas that we heard about challenges with the reporting mechanisms and guidance around reporting was with the diversity and hiring report, the sliding scale, and the financial reporting manual. I was just wondering if you've heard these similar concerns at the AIB, and if the AIB has a plan or a timeline for how they plan to address those concerns.
Right. Well, thank you for that question. And the answer is yes, we have heard. And I think the beauty of the working relationships that exist now is that these concerns get elevated to MSDE, and because of the communication with AIB, we have a chance to understand these concerns and then to address them. And there are a number of examples where this process has led to adjustments and changes in reporting requirements. And that process will continue. We are sensitive to the number of reports that are required. We're trying to streamline the reporting effort. And I think we're going to see some important changes in that in the coming year.
Perfect. Quick question, Delegate Acevedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for your presentation. If you can briefly speak to the AIB's meetings with MDE around teacher planning and any support that's given. Again, from my earlier comment, I hear from teachers in my district around teacher planning time and how that impacts instruction and in turn impacts learning. It's a concern. And I would really like to know what the AIB in collaboration with MDE is doing to support teachers and to ensure that there's greater time for planning so that there are better outcomes in terms of the classroom and instruction. Thank you.
Yes.
Briefly, please.
Yes. Well, I think that in a way, this speaks to the collaborative time that we were addressing just a moment ago. The answer to this question, the answer to the issue, I mean, the way we have to address this issue, we've got to build the pipeline of more qualified teachers. And I'm pleased to see that there is going to be some investment of funds to increase the Grow Your Own program to increase the number of certified teachers. There's going to be a significant effort to recruit out-of-state teachers to come to Maryland. And because of all the attention we're getting for what we're doing with the blueprint, I think that will be very successful. As we build up the pipeline and we can implement the collaborative time, this will address the issue that you're raising. It is very important, and we are focused on that, and we must move forward with this, with the implementation of collaborative time when we can build up the pipeline of qualified teachers.
Great. I don't see any other questions. Ms. Heiss, Dr. Kerwin, thank you both for being with us and all your work over the many years and getting this, the legislation before us and now implementing it. Thank you so much.
Well, keep the faith. We're going to get there. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to do quick MSDA and BTU. We're going to have them come on down together. And we're going to not do questions for this segment because we're past our hard stop. So come on up. Paul Lemmy, Nikki Woodard, Samantha, Christina Duncan Evans, just have you up there together if that's okay so that we can, or at least behind and ready to testify. We do have a judiciary coming in here at 1, so. And we'd ask you just to, try to get to your high points if you can. I'm so sorry. We still have Pazam after you, so.
Chair Barnes, Chair Atterbury, thank you. I think we'll skip the pleasantries. I'm Paul Lemley. I'm president of MSDA. We represent about 75,000 members across the state, 23 counties. We have 42 local associations representing every kind of employee in our K-12 public schools and some employees in community colleges as well.
I'm Dr. Nikki Woodward, and I am an early interventionist infant toddler specialist who worked in Montgomery County for 19 years, and I serve as the vice president for MSDA.
And I'm Samantha Zwirling, MSC's Managing Director of Political and Legislative Affairs. Thank you. An update on the blueprint implementation, going very quickly through it, and I'll turn it to Paul.
Yep. So We'll start with community schools. Thank you for your commitment to community schools. Community schools have truly transformed the lives of countless students, their families, and the broader school community across Maryland. The Maryland model has placed a strong emphasis on family and community engagement and integrated student supports, offering wraparound services to address the non-academic barriers students often face. We have designated, as you know, 621 community schools. However, there's one critical component that is still missing: an integrated focus on instruction and curriculum to ensure every child receives an education that is not only equitable, but also responsive and engaging. It is essential that instruction and curriculum be integrated into the community school framework. Every community school conducts their needs assessment to identify the supports and services unique to that school community, and what they would need to be most meaningful and useful for those students and families. The results of these assessments can be and should be across instruction and curriculum. And so we want to make sure that we are emphasizing the student-centered, culturally relevant, and engaging learning practices. Teaching strategies must make learning relevant to the students' lives, promote critical thinking, and offer hands-on interactive experiences. This focus is key to meeting the diverse needs of students and supporting their academic achievement, personal growth, and overall well-being.
The educator shortage continues to have an impact on our schools, communities, and our students. And as we tackle that shortage, we want to think about what keeps people in their jobs and attracts them to the profession. So our polling says that the top two issues for our members in terms of why they stay is pay and their working conditions and excessive workload. So I'll be as brief as I can to talk about what we do with the time that we're talking about when we say collaborative time. I was a high school teacher with 60% of my time teaching and 40% non-teaching on other projects. So what I did with that, I planned 20 to 25 meetings a week for 2 to 3 different courses, graded. I'll just give you 3 to 5 minutes per kid times 120 kids. That's 6 to 10 hours per week. About 50 recommendations a year for admissions, scholarships, internships, and jobs. Every single family communication, every email or call with colleagues fits in this 40% of time. With administrators, every family meeting, every IEP meeting, every 504, every staff meeting, every department meeting. And what I'm focused on in terms of collaborative time, national board certification across departments, the applications for our National Honor Society, and all the activities related to the class of 24. This is every event from the beginning of school to the end, all in that 40% of time. It's critical that we do what we can to eventually meet that goal. Like Dr. Kerwin said, it's a pause. We want to get there as soon as possible, and it's an area that helps all our teachers and our students.
In areas of improvement, through your collaboration, we have passed the Educator Shortage Reduction Act and created the Grow Your Own program to get more folks into the profession. And so this is great progress, but we hope that we can fund those initiatives and make sure that education support professionals, aspiring educators, and conditional teachers have a pathway to certification. We're also excited about Delegate Miraku North's bill to join the Teacher Interstate Mobility Compact. We'd like to see that so we can bring more folks into the profession in Maryland.
Moving to educator pay, we've made great progress in establishing $60,000 as a starting salary for teacher. It's a model across the country. On average, over the last 5 years, we think teacher salaries have gone up about 15%. You saw 10 in some other areas, and education support professionals by about 12%. Both great. However, no one mentioned inflation. That's about 22% for the same period, according to DLS's fiscal briefing, and no one mentioned the increases in housing or rental costs over that time. MSDE is working with Delegate Wims to introduce legislation this year supporting a living wage for education support professionals. And we've seen, as you saw, about tenfold increases in national board certification, participation, and attainment since the blueprint began. That includes me. And we also have some inequities in the salary increases associated with the national board. So we're looking forward to working with Delegate Feldmark for the legislation to ensure that school counselors and others who get that will be eligible for those increases.
So finally, due to a change by the board, there has been some inequities across amongst educators when they are renewing their NBC. When current commission initially recommended the structure for the maintenance of certification, the National Board certification renewal process was every 10 years. At that time, the proposal in its incentives of the MOC, the renewal 3 times, which would lead across an educator's 30-year career. However, in between that time, National Boards has changed that, and their renewal is now every 5 years. So what that does now is that creates some inequities that exist. We have some of our educators who will not even be eligible to continue the MOC until year 2029, while others who may have begun it only a couple of years ago will be renewing earlier. So we need to look at and address how do we make sure that we're meeting the needs and we're actually being equitable in our practices across the MOC, given the significant change that was done since its inception with the passing of the blueprint.
And finally, these are our other legislative priorities. We appreciate the House's commitment to the blueprint and to raising revenue both on the state and a local level. And we look forward to working with you throughout the rest of the session. Thank you.
To be to you.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, Chair Barnes, Chair Atterbury, and the distinguished members of Appropriations and Ways and Means. My name is Christina Duncan-Evans, and I'm the Teacher Chapter Chair of the Baltimore Teachers Union. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the implementation of the Blueprint for Maryland's future in Baltimore City. Next slide, please. While the Blueprint was designed to ensure that every student in Maryland receives a world-class education, our major concern is that its potential is not being fully realized in Baltimore City. Despite the opportunities for collaboration provided by this legislation, our district has repeatedly chosen a path of avoidance, deferring necessary conversations to high-stakes formal negotiations and increasingly expensive and time-consuming arbitrations, where mediators without extensive background in the blueprint are determining its path forward. Next slide. Unlike every school district in Maryland, Baltimore City has not established a work group with the Collective Bargaining Association to generate ideas and foster consensus on the Blueprint's 5 pillars. A particularly troubling example of the district's approach is its failure to support national board certification for educators despite its proven impact on student achievement. Baltimore City ignored a successful state-funded pilot program that supported Black educators in attaining national board certification, a program designed to address the systemic inequities mentioned here. Next slide, please. After lengthy contract negotiations over the Blueprint career pathways, the district introduced the concept of new leadership roles outlined on the slide you'll see. However, when pressed for specifics over a series of months, the district was unable to provide detailed job descriptions or clarify essential implementation details. The language that you see was language that we were able to agree to during impasse negotiations, impasse mediation, and to this point, we have yet to receive answers to important questions about level 3 of the career pathway from our employer, such as the number of roles that will be allocated, the responsibilities, and how folks in these level 3 roles will be evaluated, trained, and supported. Next slide, please. This slide represents the salary scales that we were able to negotiate for additional roles, which we also reached at impasse. Slide 6, please. Next slide. You can skip to the next slide. Baltimore City remains with the lowest amount of planning time in the state, something I'd like to emphasize based on a report by the Fund for Educational Excellence, Baltimore City Public Schools partner. Next slide. And can you please go to the next slide? The Fund for Educational Excellence released the report, Should I Stay or Should I Go? And they surveyed a wide selection of city schools teachers who had left the school district. Next slide, please. Teachers note a big disconnect between expectations from district leadership and management and what their everyday experience in schools is like. Many teachers believe that staff at every level in central office have largely lost touch with what's happening in schools day to day. We've heard a lot about developing a pipeline, but what we have is a pipeline that's leading to a leaky bucket. Unless we make teaching a sustainable profession, where people can raise families, enjoy a profession that spans multiple decades without burnout, without excessive demands, we will continue in Baltimore City to see the challenges of retention and recruitment that make the blueprint unmanageable on its current timeline. Next slide. Work-life balance emerged as a major concern for educators in the Fund for Educational Excellence report, and while it's encouraging to hear that many people are hearing from teachers about the need for additional training, we are hearing from educators about the need for additional time to complete the tasks that they already have. This is why we're hearing that so many people are leaving the profession, and we need to address the fact that we cannot keep educators in their roles under the current constraints that they're facing. I know that time is short, so I'll close there.
Thank you all for bridging that and hitting your high points. We appreciate it. We have your full presentations, and I know the committee will read them, and we're all available to you for meetings, so please avail yourselves of that as well. We have one last presentation from Pazam. You all want to come on up?
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Pat Fannin. I'm the Executive Director of Pazam, and this is Dr. Maria Navarro. She's our Superintendent of Charles County Public Schools and the Pazam Legislative Committee Chair. Okay. So I'm just going to blow through the slides for you. I did email this information this morning to both the committees, so this is a pretty comprehensive document that we put together this fall. We are year 3 of 10 into the blueprint, but just like we would ask our principals to evaluate their school improvement plans, we thought it was important to also evaluate our work in the blueprint and decide where we are going to press forward and where we need to pump the brakes. And so this document goes through that. And we are working with the AIB and MSDE on some of these, and you also are going to see some, hopefully, in some legislative initiatives. Dr. Navarro is going to briefly talk about some of our successes and suggestions.
So I can read a room, just like I can read students, and I know that we have a few minutes, so I'm going to make up for time. You have the presentation in front of us. What I would say is I am here before you representing all of my colleagues, all of the local superintendents, and I would urge you to please look carefully at our recommendations. We lead 24 school systems, of which we are very proud to work with our teachers, our administrators, our families, and our community members to improve the education opportunities for every single kid that walks through our doors. The policy recommendations that we put forward as a group, we always do not agree, and we don't have the same context of decision-making across all of our school systems. But what we put down and what we bring to you as recommendations are the ones where 24 superintendents could stand behind. So I urge you to please take some time to take a look at our recommendations carefully. We have done this work. We are excited to work with our teacher unions locally. We're excited to work with our families, with our local governments, along with the AIB and MSDE. But we have done this work for 3 years, and we have learned our lessons. And so what we bring forward to you is a request for some changes that need to happen, as Dr. Kerwin said, so that we can continue the important reform efforts that we have highlighted here today through the various organizations that came before you earlier to speak on the work. Is there more work to do? Yes. We all need to be held accountable to assess the impact of the funding and the expenditures that we have. We love the fact that we are the top state in the nation for nationally board certified teachers. We need to look at the impact of those nationally board certified teachers in the schools where we have the greatest need and the impact that they do for our student outcomes. There's plenty of recommendations there. So with that, I just please urge you to take a few minutes. It takes a lot to get 24 of my wonderful colleagues to all agree on recommendations. And we did this work to bring it forward to you as the best information that we have as you make decisions locally and as you continue to put funding, reform efforts and funding to continue to support education across all Maryland schools. With that, I think we want to talk through the devil's in the details as it relates to the budget. Thank you.
And I heard that loud and clear. This isn't a budget hearing, and it's not a hearing on the governor's budget and his education bill, but as you heard from Dr. Michael, funding matters for student achievement, and that's what we're here for, is student achievement. And so we need to advocate and explain that we do need funding in order to get the outcomes that you're expecting. And I'm not going to go through these slides, but I'm just going to briefly ask you to take a peek at the charts that we've put in the document. And this is just to let you know that special education and transportation costs were not fully examined during the Kerwin Commission and were set aside to be studied afterwards. And we need you to understand that there are not many discretionary dollars in education spending, and almost every discretionary dollar that we have goes into costs that are not part of the foundation funding. And our special education students are our most vulnerable, and these costs are exorbitant. These are only examples of sort of mid-sized districts, but you can take a look at your own district. And again, I'm just going to briefly touch on, this is what the proposal looks like for this year. You can see that we're looking at a potential increase of a 3.11% increase, a $274 per student increase. That is not a historic investment. That is going to yield national recognized student outcomes, and if we don't say it, we need to say this for our students. So we did not come here and did not expect this session to defend the foundation program or anything about that, but it's important that we shine a light on it. And the last thing that no one has talked about yet, and I have not watched your fiscal briefing from yesterday, but when you cut the foundation program, it's a scaffolding effect, and I know this is boring for folks that are not numbers people, but it affects these other populations. And while the special education funding was held harmless by the governor, what you don't see is that it also has an impact on local spending. Local education spending is a split responsibility in the state of Maryland between the state and the local governments. And so when you're talking about $122 million savings to the blueprint, it's really a double hit in education funding. And I just have to say, none of this goes to help the state's bottom line for the deficit this year. So we appreciate the opportunity to go quickly through our slides, and we really hope that you'll give us the time and the space to build on the investments from the last 3 years to see this through.
Thank you, and thanks for the point about the foundation formula and how changes to the foundation do flow through to comp ed and English learners and other areas, and that's something we're very aware of, and I don't think you'll see that coming out of the House. I'll just put it that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for abridging it. We have your full presentation. We will look it over, and we're available to you as well. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Chair Barnes, and to both the Ways and Means Committee and the Appropriations Committee and all of our speakers that came today. We appreciate your time. It was a long afternoon. I'm sure it could have been longer, but this just signifies how important the topic is. So thank you very much, and that concludes our joint briefing.